All right, so today we are diving into the world of the Sentinelese,
Oh, wow.
one of the most isolated tribes on the planet.
Yeah.
We've got excerpts from their Wikipedia page, and this is a story that's both fascinating and, frankly, a little bit unsettling.
It really, when you start to think about the Sentinelese, I think one of the first things that comes to mind is just this sense of mystery and how much we don't know about them. It really makes you question what we think we know about human history and connection. In our modern age, the Sentinelese offer this really unique glimpse into a world untouched by globalization.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so for those who need a quick refresher,
Yeah.
the Sentinelese call North Sentinel Island home.
Right.
It's a tiny, tiny speck of land in the Bay of Bengal. Picture this. Dense jungles, ringed by coral reefs roughly the size of Manhattan.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk about change of scenery.
It's incredible. And that geographic isolation is absolutely crucial here. We're potentially talking about thousands of years of development within the confines of this island. So their entire reality, their sense of self, their sense of community has been shaped by this unique environment, which is just incredible
Yeah.
to think about.
And which might explain why they're not exactly rolling out the welcome mat for visitors.
Right.
The source material touches on their history of repelling outsiders, researchers, fishermen who, veered off course, even a helicopter.
Yeah.
Let's just say they have a very, very clear way of communicating no trespassing.
Right. And I think it's important to put ourselves in their shoes for a moment. If your entire existence had been confined to this island with no context for the world beyond the horizon, wouldn't you be wary of strangers?
I think I would be.
It's this clash of worldviews, right?
Yeah.
A collision between the familiar and the utterly unknown.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's not just their behavior that's shrouded in mystery. Even basic information about their physical appearance is limited.
Right.
They're described as having dark skin and a muscular build, which, given their hunter-gatherer lifestyle, makes perfect sense.
Right. Yeah. And there's been some speculation about insular dwarfism, this idea that they might be shorter in stature due to generations of living on a small island with limited resources. But it's important to remember that this is just a theory. We just don't have enough data to confirm it.
Yeah.
It could just as easily be attributed to their specific genetic makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to piece together this puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly.
And that goes for their population, too.
Right.
Estimates range from as few as 35 to as many as 500. That's a huge margin of error.
Yeah, it's a massive difference.
It really highlights just how little we actually know about them.
It does, and it really, I think, underscores the importance of approaching this topic with sensitivity. Because, without regular peaceful contact, any attempt to learn more becomes inherently intrusive.
Absolutely. And tragically, this lack of understanding and respect for their isolation had devastating consequences back in 2018. You might recall the story of John Allen Chau, the American missionary who went to the island illegally, hoping to convert the Sentinelese to Christianity.
Yeah, it was a tragic incident, and it really brought, I think, the ethical complexities of interacting with uncontacted peoples, into sharp focus.
Yeah, for sure. It's true. It makes you wonder where we go from here.
Right.
How do we reconcile our desire to learn and understand
Right.
with the responsibility to protect and respect?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? And I don't think there are any easy answers.
Right.
I really don't. But I do think that, digging deeper into what we do know about the Sentinelese can offer some valuable insights. For instance, the source material mentions that they utilize metal salvaged from shipwrecks.
Oh, right. They incorporate it into their tools and weapons and things
Yeah.
like that.
And this detail, while seemingly small, actually challenges some common assumptions about the Sentinelese.
Okay.
Right? They're often portrayed as this, Stone Age people, completely cut off from the outside world.
Right.
But the fact that they are utilizing materials that originate from beyond their island tells a different story. It suggests a level of resourcefulness and awareness of, a wider world and perhaps even, a pragmatic approach to incorporating new materials into their existing technologies.
It's really interesting. It's like they're choosing to define their own terms of engagement.
Yeah.
Even if that means keeping the outside world at arm's length.
Precisely. And this theme of selective interaction, of choosing when and how to engage, I think comes up repeatedly in the research.
Right.
For example, the Wikipedia article recounts this fascinating story from the late 19th century Apparently, a Sentinelese individual ended up drifting to a nearby island inhabited by the Anj, another indigenous group.
Okay, I think I remember reading about this. And he actually lived amongst them for a couple of years, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this brief period of integration, I think, offers this really, tantalizing glimpse into the Sentinelese capacity for, adaptation and cultural exchange. It makes you wonder what that experience must have been like for him,
Oh, absolutely.
thrust into a completely different, social structure, a new language,
Yeah.
all while his own people remain this kind of distant enigma on the horizon.
It's hard to even fathom, really. Did they ever try to bring him back to North Sentinel Island?
They did. British administrator Maurice Portman returned to the Ange with this Sentinelese individual, hoping to use him as a bridge for communication. However, the attempt backfired, I think, pretty spectacularly.
Oh, no.
The Sentinelese didn't recognize him and reacted with immediate hostility.
Wow. So I guess that really just kind of underscores just how deeply ingrained their distrust of outsiders is.
Yeah.
And honestly, when you consider like the historical context, can we really blame them?
No, not at all. And the source material alludes to some truly horrific incidents from the colonial period. Attempts to forcibly capture Sentinelese individuals, bring them back to the mainland for study, or even worse, as curiosities.
Yeah.
It's a dark chapter that I think really highlights the exploitative nature of those early encounters.
Yeah.
So no wonder they've responded with such, fierce resistance.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, but it also makes those like rare instances of seemingly peaceful contact all the more remarkable, like the expeditions that were led by that Indian anthropologist, Tian Pandit.
Exactly, exactly. Pandit took a completely different approach,
Yeah.
one based on patience, respect, and a deep understanding of the Sentinelese's cultural sensitivities. He spent years conducting visits to the island, carefully leaving gifts, observing their reactions.
Right, right. And it sounds like he actually managed to build a certain level of, I don't know, like trust with them,
Yeah.
right? Because there were moments where the Sentinelese actually approached his team, seemingly curious and open to a degree of interaction.
It's true. And it speaks volumes, I think, about the power of approaching these encounters with humility and a genuine desire for understanding rather than attempting to impose our own agendas.
Yeah.
There's a valuable lesson there, I think.
For sure. And it's not just academics who have had these moments of unexpected connection. You know, remember that story we talked about earlier about the scrap dealer who salvaged a shipwrecked vessel near North Sentinel Island?
Yeah, do you guys see it?
Kind of a crazy story.
It is, yeah.
Well, the source material mentions how he reported these surprisingly friendly interactions with the Sentinelese during his salvage operation.
Wow.
They would actually come out to the wreck and barter for metal scraps,
Really?
which is just mind-blowing when you think about it.
That is fascinating, yeah. It does make you think, It challenges this narrative of them as purely hostile or fearful.
Right.
There's a pragmatism there,
Yeah.
a clear understanding of the value of certain materials, even those that aren't native to their island.
It's like they're saying, we see you, we know you have things we might find useful, but we're going to engage on our terms.
Right.
It's a really powerful statement about autonomy and self-determination.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that fundamental question, whose right is it to decide?
Right.
Do we as a global community have the right to impose contact on a people who have made it abundantly clear they wish to remain isolated?
Yeah.
Especially when that contact could have potentially devastating consequences for their health and culture.
Yeah, it's a heavy question and one that I don't envy anyone tasked with answering.
Right.
But it's definitely a conversation that we need to have.
Absolutely.
Because the Sentinelese, for all their mystery and their isolation, really force us to confront some fundamental truths about, I think, our own relationship with the world.
Right.
And the responsibility we have to protect those who are different from us.
I agree. Yeah, and it really makes you think about, all the different facets of this whole thing. I mean, remember we were discussing, the impact of the 2004 tsunami on the island.
Oh, gosh, yeah. How could I forget? It's like their entire world was just reshaped by that event.
Exactly. And, in the aftermath, there were a number of expeditions to North Sentinel Island, some aerial, to assess the damage and likely with some hope of making contacts.
Right, right. Did they find anyone?
They did. And here's where it gets really, really interesting.
Okay.
While the Sentinelese were understandably cautious, they actually responded to these post-tsunami expeditions with less overt hostility than in some previous encounters.
Really? So even after such a devastating event, there was a glimmer of, I don't know, maybe like recognition, of a shared experience,
Yeah.
as if to say, we're all part of something larger, even if we choose to live apart.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thought, isn't it? I mean, the tsunami was this force of nature that impacted, everyone, regardless of their isolation.
Yay.
And it does make you wonder if it shifted something in the Sentinelese's perception of the outside world.
It's certainly a lot to ponder. This entire deep dive has been full of those moments
Yeah.
where you kind of bump up against the limits of what we know and what we may never fully understand.
Right.
But within those gaps, those unanswered questions, there's a certain, like, I don't know, beauty?
There is. And it's those very questions that I think anthropologist Vishwajit Pandya grappled with in his writings in the Sentinelese. He proposed an approach he called controlled contact.
Oh, okay. Controlled context.
Yeah.
What does that look like in this context?
So essentially, it acknowledges that the Sentinelese are not, completely oblivious to the outside world
Right.
and have, on occasion, initiated contact themselves, albeit cautiously.
Right, like those instances we talked about where they would, approach researchers to take gifts.
Exactly, exactly. Or their interactions with the scrap dealer.
Yeah.
So rather than forcing interactions on our terms, Pandya suggests adopting a more passive approach. Making our presence known, perhaps leaving gifts, but ultimately allowing the Sentinelese to dictate the pace and nature of any engagement.
So like leaving the door open, but not pushing them through it.
Precisely,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a delicate dance, for sure, but it seems to be, the approach that best respects their autonomy
Yeah.
while acknowledging the reality that they are not entirely isolated from the world.
It's a lot to consider. And honestly, I think that's the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive. There are no, like, easy answers when it comes to the Sentinelese.
Right.
No, like, simple solutions that will satisfy everyone's concerns. But by engaging with their story, by grappling with the ethical complexities, I think we open ourselves up to a deeper understanding of what it means to be human, to connect, and to respect the profound diversity of cultures that exist in our world.
Well said. I think, perhaps the most respectful way to approach the unknown is with a sense of humility and a willingness to sit with the discomfort of not having all the answers.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Oh.
We spent all this time discussing what we know, or rather what we don't know, about the Sentinelese. But what about their perspective?
Right.
What do they think about those distant lights on the horizon? The occasional buzzing helicopter or the strange boats that sometimes appear off their shores. It's both humbling and awe-inspiring to realize that their inner world, their thoughts, their beliefs, may forever remain a mystery to us. And perhaps that's as it should be. Sometimes the most profound discoveries are the ones that remind us of the vastness of what we don't know. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.